Thank you very much indeed. Good morning. Welcome to the penultimate decision-making meeting of the municipal year. The ultimate one goes to my friend Lynn Stagg this afternoon, so we're going to try and be out of there before she starts. My name is Darren Sanders. I'm the Liberal Democrat member for Baffins, North Milton and South Copner, and I'm also the Cabinet member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness. Before we begin, there's various safety information I'm told I have to relay. So if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Don't use the lifts. Please assemble in front of Queen Victoria's statue in the Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations of the Guildhall Trust, we're in the Portsmouth Guildhall this morning, which they own. Anyone who's signed in at the reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of the meeting. Now, for those people who are watching on web streaming, hello, but I've got to draw everyone's attention to the fact here that this meeting is being live streamed, so everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera. Sorry, that also includes those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they don't want to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. I was told off for not doing that yesterday, so I'm going to do it on and off. So I'm going to now introduce everybody, starting over there on my far left.
Alison Harper, Democratic Services.
You failed the first test, which was putting your microphone on. However, that's fine, Alison. Thank you very much.
Adam Hardwick, Head of Capital Projects.
Steve Groves, Head of Building Maintenance.
Meredith Hughes, Assistant Director for Buildings.
Merrick Travascus, IT Business Partner for Housing.
James Hill, the Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Claire Hardwick, Head of Private Sector Housing. Sally Scattergood, Assistant Director of Housing.
And then possibly for the only time ever on my far right,
Sue Gordon, Resident.
Maria Cole, Residents Consortium.
Alan Denford, Directorate's Group Accountant.
Nicola Clanahan, Head of Housing Community Services.
excellent, thank you. And just coming in reasonably on time is Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, who is the Labour spokeswoman for Housing and Preventing Homelessness. So thank you very much for coming, Charlotte. We're very grateful. That just means you don't have to do it, the introduction, so I do it for you so you can get your breath back. Okay, that's very kind. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have three, which is Councillor Daniel Weems, Councillor George Madrick, and Trevor Lovett from the Residents Consortium. Alison, are there any others? You don't know. Okay, that's lovely. Now, does anybody have anything interesting to declare? Which applies basically to Charlotte and me. The only thing I have to which isn't really a declaration, it's just for openness and transparency, is that I'm a private tenant. So if anything goes wrong, I may or may not have been subject to the mediation pilot, but that's more in the interest of openness and transparency rather than any of the interests that we all face. Okay, so item 3 on the agenda is the Council Housing Maintenance and Improvement and Housing IT Business. It's got down here soft ward, which I've not seen before, so I'm assuming that's software. Friends and colleagues, if it's software, I'd love to know what that is. That's up there with Kvefe, I have to say. Mered and Merrick, fire away.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Good morning. Got the report in front of you this morning, and both myself and Merrick will be presenting the annual report. The report includes our annual planned capital and revenue expenditure plans for repairs and maintenance for the next financial year, and Merrick will talk then to the IT planned investment programme for 23-24 as well. I also wanted to update the members on the year-end position with regard to the delivery of the 22-23 capital programme and talk to the highlighted issues that are facing our service in terms of the delivery of programmes going forward, what the economic forecast looks like for the next 12 months, but also significant factors that are affecting the construction industry as well in terms of costs. So the recommendations of the report is that the allocation of revenue budgets for repairs, which is shown in Appendix A, be noted. The allocation of capital budgets in Appendix B and C to be agreed, and the Cabinet member notes the year-end position and progress of the 22-23 capital spends. So in terms of the background and the revenue and capital budgets, the housing investment programme for 22-23 was agreed by the City Council on the 21st of February 23. The budget set at £28.6 million. The Council House repairs and maintenance budget for 22-23 and for 23-24 was approved at the Housing and Preventing Homelessness Cabinet decision meeting on the 2nd of February, and the capital programme is budgeted at £30,390,000. And I think the report goes on. I think we wanted to highlight that the report highlights our ongoing investment in fire safety works across the estates, our commitment to legislation that's is imposed upon us in terms of the Environment Act, the Building Safety Act, and also ongoing work that we're doing around energy efficiency and our aspirations to decarbonise the social housing stock. Section 5 is a new section for this year in the report, and it follows on from for information only report that I brought to your October Cabinet, Councillor Sanders, which sets out really the position we are in terms of our delivery of the programme that was delivered last year. So this is a follow-on from the October report and an update in terms that we're actually currently working on 56 capital projects across the HRA portfolio. 10 projects have actually completed this year. 3 projects have continued from last year, so these are significant projects. One is at the courts, we've got another one at Hawthorne Crescent, another one at Haverset House. These are significant projects which span 2 financial years. Another 16 new projects have started this year as well. The value of, and the remaining projects to make up that 56 are being evaluated, the specifications are being written, they're being tendered, etc., etc. So they're in a various state of progress in terms of delivery. The value of works currently being worked on across all those areas is just under £33 million, and the expenditure to the end of the 3rd financial quarter was just under £26 million. In total, we'll have worked on 59 blocks across the portfolio and improved 1,700 dwellings with capital projects and investment in those projects. And that's on top of what we call our business as usual works, which may be installing new heating systems, new kitchens, bathrooms, and improvements within dwellings. The other area I'd like to highlight as well is some of the key activities that we've completed this year. We've actually completed the actual installation of the first sprinkler project at Ladywood House. There's final boxing in and completion of finishings required on that project, but that needs to follow on with some of the works we're doing around the Warden call system in that block as well. But the actual the fundamentals of the sprinkler system are up and are activated, etc. The team has also established a void sublot from our framework of main contractors, and the void sublot enables us to have a faster route to market when we're dealing with our more complex and more complicated voids, so we can speed up the void process and turnaround of empty properties. We've developed an asbestos consultant framework, so PCC currently employs 2 asbestos surveyors, but we're looking at expanding the service that can be delivered working with consultants to enable our own in-house surveyors to focus on perhaps more strategic work around asbestos management. We've continued with decarbonisation work across the stock and improved significant roof insulation in properties at Summers Road, Dunsmore Close, Tweed Court, Hawthorne Crescent, and also a large site out at Westley. And also the team has completed 39 pre-acquisition surveys of houses that we're looking to repurchase and bring back into the HRA portfolio of buildings. The next section is section 6 within the report, and this focuses on the challenges that both both the UK economy is facing at the moment and also the UK construction industry and how that impacts on our ability to deliver the programme, and also some of the decisions that may well have to be made during the year in terms of delivery of types of work, etc. So I think the first thing to say is that tenders that we received over the last 12 months, both for projects in the HRA, but also general fund projects we've done, and also education projects, those tender levels still remain at between 20 and 25% higher than pre-COVID levels. And what we've seen is that those levels of tenders have stabilised, but there's no return to the pre-pandemic levels of tender. So there's an additional fifth / quarter, 20 to 25% added to costs that weren't there pre-COVID. And I think that bears out with some of the economic forecasts that are coming out through the Bank of England, where although they're predicting inflation rates and interest rates to fall by the end of the year, I think it was yesterday that the CPI actually increased from January to February from 10.1% to 10.4%. So again, there's an awful lot of volatility and uncertainty into the market, coupled with the nervousness in the financial markets with the two American banks that have collapsed recently, and also the uncertainty over Credit Suisse in Europe and the takeover of that. So a lot of uncertainty in the markets as well. And Although my report was written a couple of weeks ago, we try obviously keep up to date with what's happening and how that might affect our programmes of work, but also the costs that we're experiencing, etc. And we haven't had an update as of yet, but the January report from the BCIS, which is the Building Cost Information Service, so it's part of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, was predicting that tender levels would remain at a lowish level this year. So we've gone up to that 20-25%, but probably stabilised this year at around 2.2-2.5%. And those figures were corroborated by both Mace and Gardner and Theobald, who are well-known construction consultants and advise in terms of tender costs and building cost inflation. Of course, those figures were at the end of January, and we await to see the latest update, which should be published next week, in terms of how the recent announcements may affect those predictions going forward. And I think the other bit that I would to focus on as well is that wage agreements, both in the public sector and the private sector, are presently being settled. I know over the past week or so we've had there's been NHS agreements in terms of settlements for nurses, etc. And certainly there's positive discussions with the RMT around transport, etc. But again, wage rises within both the public sector and private sector will have that impact on construction going forward. I think just to close this section, I think one of the key things to say is that when we analyse our budget for capital works, which is approximately £25 million, if we applied that to if we applied the tender increases that we were facing now compared to our budgets, pre-COVID, you'd be adding anything between £5 and £6 million to those pre-COVID costs. So that's a significant amount of additional costs that we're having to pick up through the programmes, etc. But also then we're having to take on board new legislation that's being brought in that we have to comply with. So the Environment Act, and that's assisting our colleagues in waste management in terms of improvements to things like waste collection and our bin stores, etc. But also the Building Safety Act, which affects our high-rise buildings, and there's significant work that we're doing this year which will inform us in terms of the priority works that we might have to do around some of those blocks. And one of the key things around the Building Safety Act and also the Charter for Social Housing is the requirement really for us to work very closely with residents, making sure that they're communicated with, that they're key stakeholders in our programmes of work and how we take that forward. And I think I think there's an acknowledgement, perhaps some of the work that we've done this year, our communication hasn't been to the high standard that we expect of both ourselves, but also that residents should expect of us. And that's certainly a key area that we're working on and we're working with residents in terms of improving that going forward to make sure that residents are fully informed of work that's intended to be undertaken on their properties. But also, if you have to make changes, we can articulate that with them and explain why we're doing that and then what might happen in due course, etc. And I think, Councillor Sanders, that covers all of the bits that I wanted to talk about. And so I'll pass over, if I may, to Merrick, who's going to talk to the IT capital programme for next year.
Thanks, Meredith. So for the IT report, traditionally broken down into two sections. So we have hardware and physical infrastructure, and we have applications and software, or softward, depending on which version you're looking at. So for the hardware section, the forward plan for this year includes the continuation of the hardware refresh to our CCTV infrastructure. So this includes the upgrade of key hardware, including servers, network switches, and local controller boxes in our HRA blocks. These are all necessary to keep the systems up to date in terms of security, compliance and performance. And the team will also work with IT to look at the potential of moving away from our current on-premise setup to the potential benefits of a cloud-hosted system at a later date. Next item concerns local full fibre. So this is for the remaining sheltered housing schemes. In the same manner that we migrated the CCTV network over to fibre, we're also doing the same with the ward and call systems away from the current PSTN lines, which are due to go obsolete by 2025. This work has been synchronised with IT, with HMB already doing the upgrade on the actual ward and call hardware in the sheltered housing blocks themselves. So not only will there be updated hardware, but also improved performance on the lines that they're connecting on. And the final item in this section is the NEC housing management servers. So these will be upgraded to new boxes. This is a technical background activity being carried out by IT to mitigate some technical risk, which will be coming up later this year, around October time. The risk, should we not do the work, would mean at that October date, the servers themselves that are running the housing management system that we use would be running at risk with no support and no security updates, which is obviously a scenario that we're very keen to avoid. For the software section, so the first point is the document management. So the setting up of an online library for tenancy files, together with backscanning services to scan all of the files in. This covers all of our area housing offices, leasehold services, sheltered housing and rough sleeping. So this will provide officers with quicker access to files from any location on any PCC device, alongside greatly improving our position on GDPR and disaster recovery position of the files themselves. Next item down is for Play and Youth for the online holiday activities and food planner. So currently the scheme is managed very well by the HAF team, but it's very manually admin intensive. They have to do lots of uploading, sometimes do the bookings themselves, together with managing suppliers across different events. This new web portal will be used by both residents, officers and suppliers across the scheme, and will show a consolidated view of all of the HAF events available across the city. Residents will be able to use the portal to book their children onto multiple events at once. Suppliers will use the portal directly to list details of their events and advertise them to residents. And officers will use the portal for management and reporting of the scheme overall. And the final item is the rent monitor application replacement. So our contract on our current rent monitoring application expires March next year. At the time of implementation around 2019-2020, the application was the sole choice in the market for automated rent monitoring and management. Since then, the market has expanded. There's a larger variety of applications available from different vendors. So IT are currently working with local authority housing to update their requirements for that software, with the aim of providing them a suitable product for increased value for money versus what they currently pay.
Thank you very much indeed. Merrick, for those people who don't know, we will have a certain process that we go through for comments. So I want to start with the Residents Consortium. I don't know who wants to go first or last or later. I think it's two, so it's one or the other.
Sorry, it's Maria Cole. I'm not sure if I've got this in the right order of comment, but page 15, asbestos removal. I see there's still quite a lot of money highlighted to spend on this. I don't think it was in this report. It might have been a further one. You've done about 50% of properties. Do you know roughly how many more are left to sort out with the asbestos?
Yeah, so I think as we've sort of spoken before, a lot of our properties were built in the 50s and 60s, so a lot of our properties do contain asbestos, and I would sort of reassure any residents that any asbestos in those buildings is perfectly safe all the time, that it's undisturbed. A lot of that cost that we're talking about there is is part of us underdoing any refurbishment works, and obviously that is the time when we may or may not be disturbing asbestos, and that's when we would take it out. So there's not a planned programme as such to remove asbestos, but in due course, when we're doing other works, that is predominantly when that work is undertaken.
Maria, can I come back as well, Councillor Sanders, on that?
Yes, please.
So it's just to add, Maria, that if residents are considering doing anything in their own property and they might have concerns about asbestos, we do have a number of leaflets, etc., around asbestos and what to do with it. But you know, a call to the repair support team or the local area housing office. We can give, you know, either advice over the phone, or we can arrange for a surveyor to come and give advice in person. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, that residents obviously can do work, but if they're unsure about anything, they can reach out and we can advise what measures should be undertaken.
Please put your microphone on, Maria. Sorry.
Page 17. Tipton House and Edgbaston House, electrical heating upgrade. Is this where we're doing it so that residents will be solely responsible and it will go through their electric meters?
Yeah, so there's an ongoing bit of work making sure that the heating is working as effectively as it can, Maria. So that's an ongoing piece of work. But the team has been charged with undertaking a feasibility to determine the cost of changing from a communal system to an individually controlled system, but also it's not only just the cost to PCC to actually administer that work, but also what that looks like to the resident in terms of, you know, we know what the Portsmouth City Council is paying for electricity, etc., and how that charge is then imparted to the resident. If residents then start managing their own electricity, we want to ensure that they can see both sides of the financial story, for want of a better word. And so, if they're on the heating charge, they'll be paying this amount per year, etc. If they go to their own sourced payments, etc., for heating, and they use it for so many hours a day, this is what they might be paying, etc. So I think the key thing for me is making sure that residents can make an informed decision about whether they'd want to move from a communal system to an individually controlled system.
Sorry. Page 30. Wimpy Courts decoration. I don't know if this is the place where Sue was previously living, but I think she'd be glad to know that there's finally going to be some work done on the courts. I think that's a good thing. And the last one that I've got on here, I think it's on the impact assessment. I'm just really pleased to see on page 43 that I don't think we leave out anybody in our equalities. age, disability, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender reassignment, sex, religion or belief, pregnancy, maternity, marriage, civil partnership and socio-economic. I mean, is there anything else left that we could put onto inequalities?
I don't know. I don't know if there's anything left.
I do.
Yeah. I think the other thank you for that comment, Maria. We'll check. I think the other thing to add about that is that the impact assessment, there's a number of references and links within the document which are to staff that have actually left the organisation, and I know, speaking to Democratic Services, the impact assessment is being updated to reflect then the latest situation. So I know we've picked it up. I think Councillor Madge may have picked it up in a previous meeting, but I know that's in train now and it's being amended.
I hate interrupting, Maria, but I think one of the issues for everybody going forwards is people with mental health issues, which is sadly not a protected criteria under the Equalities Act, which is a shame and was not taken seriously for decades by the NHS and other people. So I do think there's another one in addition to the rightfully long list that's in there. But I think that's more of a general issue because it will affect people in different ways. But that's one to keep an eye on. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Maria. I'm not supposed to. Hello? You're right there. Did you have anything? If you have, yes. If you haven't, that's fine.
Sorry, Councillor Sanders. Do you know what? I haven't really had a chance to go all through this because I didn't get my paperwork till Monday afternoon.
That will be dealt with again.
I think I'm the only one that it wasn't delivered last week.
Okay. I will again raise that issue outside of this meeting.
I'm so sorry.
There's no need to apologise. It's not your fault.
And can I say, Maria, they've already done Lord's Court. Yeah. So I think they're starting on another one now. Seems to be going well. They look lovely, what they've done. Mm.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. It's been a while, and it's been a priority for us for a while.
I'm not due till next year, but at least it's looking lovely what they have done.
Well, it's very kind of you. Thank you very much. I'm sure the team will take that. Mareda, you're going to take that back to the team?
I will take that back to the team. Thank you for that, Sue. The other thing I can suggest as well, Sue, if when you've had a chance to read through the report and through the budget book programme, etc., if there's anything that you want to ask a question of or some clarity, more than happy to talk to you, and perhaps afterwards we'll share details, etc., and that we can talk through that. It's not a problem.
Thank you for that, Mareda. Thanks, Sue. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I just wondered, because it's not sort of referenced in the report that's been provided, but given the ongoing cost of living crisis and the impact that's having on people being able to heat their homes, basically not heating their homes, I just wondered what the impact of this was on increasing damp and mould in properties, and if this had led to more sort of requirements in terms of maintenance to properties.
Thank you for that. We are, as you're aware, fully aware of the current cost of living crisis, and certainly over the last sort of 6 months, we've seen an increase in the inquiries that we've had relating to condensation and mould. We've revisited the way that we approach that to make sure that we are obviously going out there and looking at what that cause is, and obviously there can be a range of causes for damp and mould to do with the building, so it is key that we get out there to correctly diagnose that. But also I think it's important, a couple of other things, is that we follow those up to make sure that there is no reoccurring of that damp and mould. So we have got a process where we do make follow-on appointments to make sure that we can go back and make sure that whatever the remedy is, that we've addressed that. And I think the other important thing that we do is recognising the cost of living crisis is not just a technical solution, but obviously it's also about making sure that the resident is fully aware of all the other options that are available to them. So what we've done a lot of work with our surveying team and our housing team, and our contractors about being able to make leak referrals to get additional advice. So I know that in the last period that we've had a report, we've certainly had nearly 400 referrals made by staff, and there's been around 80 referrals made by our contractors. So quite a significant number of referrals have been made to LEAP, and we do get regular reports in terms of, because I think it's easy to make the referral, but it's what the consequence of that referral was. What was the benefit to the resident? And we do monitor what they do look at is additional funding that could be made available to those residents. Sometimes there's some very straightforward measures that can be added, such as LED lighting. And there are certainly examples from some of those LEAP referrals where we've provided additional white goods or replaced boilers. So I think there's a range of measures. It's not just one, as you're aware. It's quite condensation and mould is quite a complex area, and we try to equip our teams, really, whoever they are, to utilise those visits to offer a range of solutions, I think.
That's great, thank you. Sian, did you have anything else at all? Feel free if you have.
No, just to thank you for being proactive and supporting residents at what is a really difficult time. Thank you.
That's kind. Thank you very much. Oh, hang on. Oh, we have hands at the back. I was going for James. You go first.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. And just to complement the answer that Steve just gave, it was just to say that we'll continue to promote all of the offers of help and support through the House Talk magazine, which is the magazine we send to all tenants and leaseholders in Portsmouth and Havant. And I think I'm correct in saying the next edition, which is due out shortly, contains a lot of reference to cost of living. So please keep an eye out for that as well.
Thank you. Mairead, did you have anything else?
Yeah, so the other bit that I was going to add to what Steve and James had said is that the Switched On Portsmouth team obviously work across both the private and public sector, but very closely with our social housing residents as well. So I know that there's a number of both physical leaflets and also electronic information that's landing with councillors. Certainly today, I think Councillor Gerard are in terms of updates about Switched On Portsmouth, where they can get help, etc. But also, I think there's a matrix in terms of outlining what support is available for residents going forward into the new year as well. Because I think we know that some of the energy support aspects are ending. They're ending next week, etc. But there are a number of schemes that still run into next year, etc. So hopefully, when you go back across the Civic, you'll either have an email or certainly then some collateral within your inboxes, which you can share with residents, and we can give you more, etc. So and they're quite concentrated routes into one place, and then once you go into that referral, there's a variety of areas where that residents may end up in terms of seeking support, etc.
Thank you, Mairead. I can confirm that email has been sent to all councillors at 10:16 this morning, which is a tad on the convenient side, and hard copies are being dropped into councillors' pigeonholes. I think some councillors might be slightly busier than normal over the next few weeks for some reason I can't fathom, but it does include a social housing booklet as well in that. So again, thank you for that, colleagues. A couple of questions from me, and then just some general comments to sum up. With regards to prices going up, the Office for Budget Responsibility's central working assumption is that inflation will be halved by the end of the year, which is why the Prime Minister's promise to do it is so easy, because everybody thought it was going to happen anyway. Has that been factored into, should it be factored into our assessments with regards to construction costs? Or is it just so volatile it's pointless doing it?
I think it was interesting. When I drove home last night, there was an economics program on the Radio 4, and I don't for 1 minute say I understood what they were talking about, but they were saying about the difference between inflation and also actual prices. And one of the things that we have noticed is that building cost inflation has increased over the last 3 or 4 years for a variety of reasons. We've had Brexit, we've had the war in the Ukraine, we've had the fuel crisis, etc. Everything we're seeing is that the cost of construction will remain at this level going forward. It's not going to drop down to pre-pandemic levels, and it will remain at this cost going forward. We had a core group meeting with our service providers last Friday, and some of the anecdotal information that's being fed back to us is that cost of kitchens has certainly gone. There's been two double-digit increases in the cost of kitchens and materials in this past 12 months, etc., and that's been replicated across various other areas. I think there's the hope that with perhaps energy prices and the wholesale cost of energy starting to reduce, building materials that are heavily intensive in terms of their manufacture, so things like iron and steel, ceramics, bricks, etc., cement, hopefully they might start to reduce in cost. But certainly the advice that we're seeing is that building cost prices will remain at that high level, certainly into next year.
Again, that's kind of Meredith. The second one is you mentioned pay earlier on, and this is more for people who don't know. But currently, those staff working in local government have been offered a £1,925 pay rise each year, which none of the unions have so far accepted. Two are going to ballots. One will be balloting for industrial action over that pay rise in May. But also as contractors, I'm very keen that our main contractors get paid the real living wage, which is £10.90 an hour. So again, is that going to feature in terms of our budgeting for this particular bit? It sounds like it won't, but is that going to feature in our budgeting going forwards for this?
We've allowed for inflationary pressures within both the revenue and capital programmes, but obviously wage levels are being settled at higher levels perhaps that are being expected. So the work with the contractors is ongoing in terms of pay awards, etc. And that will be something that we'll be bringing back to you in due course in terms of what that will look like and what effect that may have on our budgets going forward.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful, Meredith, and that honest approach has been something that has permeated this whole report. It's absolutely important that we're straight with tenants and leaseholders about the situation that we face. And we don't cover it up, we don't sugarcoat it, because tenants and leaseholders who pay everybody's wages, except mine, are basically very, very important and the most important people that we have. So when Sue comes back with further comments, please do that, and also please circulate it round to the spokespeople as well. But it is a tough time for everyone. We have to deal with essentially income being capped and costs going through the roof. And that's a very difficult balance that we have to do. But I'm delighted that within that, we are taking forward the priorities people say they want. The most interesting thing in the report for me is the D word, which is decarbonisation. We're stewards of this planet for our children and our grandchildren. And it's absolutely important everybody does everything we can to try and make sure that they have a reasonable planet to live on. So I'm delighted we're seeing decarbonisation. You know I want that for the whole social housing stock. That may take a while, but I think it is important that we go there. I'm delighted it's in there. Secondly, dealing with properties that are empty. I was speaking to someone in my ward last week who was saying, well, why are so many properties being empty for so long? And not just council properties, but properties across the city. I was delighted to some of the tough action that we're taking to deal with that with regards to council tax. And this sub-void lot, I think, will also help it, because we don't want people on our waiting list for too long. That's crucial. The third bit, which permeates everything in here, is making sure our tenants and leaseholders are safe. Absolutely crucial. When we came back, I should say, in 2018, sprinklers was a key demand of the Fire Brigades Union. They were right. And I'm delighted that despite the pandemic delaying things for a while, we've been able to act on that. The fourth bit is coming back to the point Charlotte raised earlier on, which is around the cost of living crisis, which is absolutely crucial. We have many of the most vulnerable and the poorest people in our city living in our properties, and we have to do what we can. My starting point with Maria's question around the changes in Edgbaston and Tipton is to make sure the bills don't go up. And And if that change means bills do not go up, then that is something I think we cannot look favourably on. But as you say, it's ultimately up to individuals to decide. I know we've had complaints about the system before, but everybody needs to make their own choices. But I'm loath to put people's bills up, I have to say. I'm delighted with the work that's been done in terms of referrals for the cost of living crisis. I mean, 400 referrals by staff and 80 by contractors, for heaven's sake, is a fantastic achievement for people who are worried and don't know, and maybe too scared to know, because people are proud in this city. We're rightly proud in this city, and we tend not to tell people we may be in trouble. So I think that's absolutely essential, and I'm delighted to hear that. With regards to the IT side, I'm delighted in particular about the online HAF portal, which essentially is going to help everybody who works on the excellent Holidays Activity Fund projects that we run across the city and get greater access to things that are near them. I know that the one in St Albans Church in my own ward, people were just loving the fact that they were actually able to have some lunch. And they're actually able to talk to other mums and other dads. That's hugely helpful. And the kids were able to play together. And that's a massive, massive help. Also bear in mind, in addition to the work that we're doing in terms of referrals, we're overseeing a £1.7 million household support fund, which also includes things, which we have made sure includes things like money for white goods, fridges, money for cutting energy bills as well, money for the pantries and larders, which we have set up, and that's hugely, hugely helpful. But I want to come back finally to Charlotte's final point, which was around damp and mould. I disagree with Charlotte, and I don't think it's down to the cost of living crisis, although the two things go together. I think it's more down to the horror show from Rochdale, whereby a child died because of damp and mould in a social housing provider. As a result of that, I have asked James and the rest of the team to oversee our procedures so that we can try and make sure we continue to crack down on it, because we cannot have people living in damp accommodation. And that's as a result, I have to say, of the Rochdale case, Charlotte, as opposed to the cost of living. But the outcome is the same. People don't want to live in damp accommodation. They want to live in good quality accommodation. They want to know that their windows ain't wet every morning. And that's something that's absolutely crucial in terms of what we want to do. So it's a tough situation. It's an honest situation. And I'm delighted you've been honest with us, Mairead. But I think in the circumstances that we face, I'm delighted that we're being, as Charlotte says, as proactive as we are. And so on that basis, I am happy to accept the recommendations in this report. And I'm very, very grateful to you, Mairead and Merrick, for that. So moving on to the updated safeguarding policy for the Play, Youth and Community Service. Nicola.
Good morning. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval for the implementation of the updated safeguarding policy for the Play, Youth and Community Services operated by Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services. The recommendation of the report is that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness approves the policy, which is attached to the report and marked Appendix A. Housing, Neighbourhoods and Building operate multiple settings across the city for the provision of service to children, young people and adults. And we collectively refer to the settings as PYC, or Play, Youth and Community. The services are committed to safeguarding children and adults who use the settings, and the policy reflects the necessity of this responsibility, and it's reviewed annually. I'm not planning to go through the full policy today, but the policy review brings up to date the working practices and requirements for staff reflecting service changes, and looks to refresh the existing policy to ensure it reflects current practice and demonstrates our commitment to the safeguarding of customers. So examples of amendments in the report are changes to the training programme for staff and reflection of changes of practices within children's services, such as the adoption of the family support plan. The Play, Youth and Community Services have been supported and advised by the Safeguarding Children Partnership in the design of the policy and practice, and the delivery of training to our staff and in our self-assessment process. So the reason for the recommendation is to formalise and update the working practices of Play, Youth and Community, to ensure that all staff and volunteers understand their role in safeguarding of children, young people and adults, and to provide information for all third parties working with the service.
Thank you for that, Nicola. Residents Consortium colleagues, do you have any comments on this?
Yes. Well, no, I shouldn't sound that angry, should I? I'm not angry.
You can sound as angry as you like. Don't
No, I'm not
worry.
angry. Page 62 in the actual policy, where it says all staff and volunteers are required to have an up-to-date DBS check. Does that include enhanced checks? And I suppose it would come under supervision. Does the person who's going to be rechecked know in advance that they're being rechecked?
Yep, so it is an enhanced DBS that we have, and we have a monitoring programme so that we can see the end dates and review those, and those are refreshed every 3 years. And yes, the person being refreshed would be aware.
Was that your question or questions? Were there any more, Maria?
More for this.
That's
agenda
lovely.
item. Thank you.
Charlotte.
Not specifically about the report, but I just wondered, sort of on average per year, how many safeguarding concerns are raised within the service?
I can't put a number on it. We do multiple referrals to MASH. We have concerns probably every week that we are responding to, whether that's formally or informally, because we're acting as an early help service, so we are responding to those concerns. So it could be anything, there's a range. I haven't got statistics on the number of MASH referrals that we've made in the past year, but multiple.
Anything else, Charlotte? No, I think for the record we could say 1 a week, roughly. I think that seems a reasonable working assumption. So thank you for your honesty, Nicola. Again, this is crucial. We want to make sure that young people who use our services have as much safety as possible, and so it's probably one of the more important things that we do. So on that basis, I'm happy to approve the policy attached and marked as Appendix A. And Nicola, thank you very much for that. Next on the list is update on the Housing Revenue Account Asset Management Strategy, which sounds incredibly dull, but I suspect isn't. Mairead.
It's very important, Councillor Sanders. It's very important. The report today is an information-only report, and it's an update on you in terms of where we are with the revision and update of the asset management strategy for the Housing Revenue Account. If I just give a brief summary in terms of the purpose of the asset management strategy is to ensure that PCC's social housing portfolio will continue to be managed with financial prudency, and again ensuring the health and safety and security of our residents plus the communities they live in. The asset management strategy will also, again this is a very key priority for us, will inform the long-term strategic maintenance decisions for our housing stock over the next 30 years, including state renewal and our response then to decarbonisation, etc. I think the key thing for me as well is just to reassure you, Councillor Sanders, that we do have one in place, an asset management strategy for the HRA. So we're not starting from scratch. We have got one in place. It was last refreshed and updated in September 21, halfway through the pandemic. But I think we acknowledge that since the pandemic's happened, there's a significant amount of new changes that have come to light since then, with regard to the City Council's net zero aspirations and the government's aspirations around net zero for social housing. The Building Safety Act has come in the last 12 months or so, and that's going to have a significant impact on us. The Charter for Social Housing places a significant responsibility on us as a landlord and how we engage with our residents, and other stakeholders, and also our provision of affordable homes going forward, and the commitment that Portsmouth has made to taking that forward. The section 4 in the report outlines the priorities around the existing asset management strategy and how we assess where we spend our money, and the hierarchy hierarchy of how we choose and how works are pulled together, etc. And I think they will still underpin the way that we deliver the work, but the key considerations in terms of working with the Social Housing Charter, the effect of the Building Safety Fund and the Building Safety Act will drive us forward. And section 5 of the report outlines the key considerations, the key principles that we need to adhere to in taking that forward, and sets out perhaps the key criteria that we need to take on board. The latter part of section 5 then sets out the work, certainly from section 5.10, sets out the work we need to do around our response to social housing decarbonisation. We've made the commitment to pilot passive house developments for new build, and so the projects that we're looking at Stroughton Court, Weacock Farm, and to name two key areas, are being designed to those passive house principles, and we will determine how affordable they are, how we can build them, the buildability of construction, etc., but also then how residents can how they live in there and how they react to those properties. The retrofit challenge of our stock is obviously is greater, significant. As Steve mentioned earlier, the majority of our stock was built in the 50s and 60s. And so our system-built houses will present a challenge to us going forward. We've proved at Wilmcote House, which was built to NFIT standard at the tail end of the 2010s, that we can build to that standard. So that's an NFIT standard. So again, it's the retrofit version of passive house, so we can do that. But we need to determine through the asset management strategy, plus the pilots we're doing, plus the decarbonisation retrofit pilots we're doing, whether the cost of upgrading the building fabric and the substantial disruption that will cause and the buildability issues of doing that work, whether that generates a benefit in saving to the residents in terms of living in the property and the cost of heating their properties. And so, determining whether to improve the stock or actually, designing and building new stock is going to be key considerations that come out of the asset management strategy. And then towards the end of section 5, sections 16 and 17 set out the key strategic and principles delivery for the asset management strategy, and that's what we'll look to build on over this coming year. In terms of what we've done to date, we've worked closely with a consultancy called Ridgeon Partners since the tail end of last summer, and they are a construction consultant who've delivered a number of asset management strategies, working with local authorities on their HRA work, and both for local authorities but also for RSLs as well. And we're working closely with them. So they've done a bit of a scoping exercise in terms of looking at our existing stock data, where there might be gaps in it. And then the key piece of work going forward, we've actually got a meeting with them later on today to set out our stall in terms of how we start the journey, how that journey materialises in terms of timescales, the key areas of engagement with stakeholders. So our residents have got a massive part to play in the development of our asset management strategy. Likewise, yourselves and members, in terms of what we want to do with the asset management strategy and getting that complete buy-in from all stakeholders, plus our own staff and other stakeholders we engage with. So there's more detailed work we've got to do with Ridge and our own staff in terms of taking that forward. There's obviously a deep dive into our data. There's further work we need to do with that, and a detailed programme will be developed, which will then impact and help us with setting our 30-year business plan and our responses to some of the things I've mentioned within the report. And the key thing is that alongside the update that we'll bring back in October in terms of where we are with our capital spend on the programmes, etc., we'll bring an update report in terms of where we are with the asset management strategy, and that will detail the journey we've been on so far, the engagement we've done with various groups, etc. There'll be a necessity to work with Nicola and the team in terms of questionnaires and engagement with residents, teams, etc., etc. So there's an awful lot of work we want to develop and take forward, and so we'll bring back a further update in October, which will articulate where we are and what that end timescale might look like for you.
Meredith, thank you very much indeed. Residents Consortium colleagues, do you have any questions, comments, criticisms, compliments? I don't mind.
Just one quick one, really. Page 106, 5.2, void service. Do we have an approximation time for how long a building will stay as a void before it's occupied?
Meredith, please put your microphone on. Thank you.
Trying to do too many things at the same time. So we run measures across our void performance, Maria. Either Steve or Sally, I'm sure will have the latest figures for us. It's an area that we obviously want to improve, because the time that a property is empty, we're not housing somebody and we're not meeting somebody's housing need. So it's a key priority for us. So we've got a working party in progress at the moment, working with housing officers, technical staff in my team and Steve's team, and our contractors in terms of improving the process and the turnaround times for voids. We've set up the void sublot to ensure that we can turn around some of the more complex and the larger voids in a faster period of time. But I don't know whether Sally or Steve, you wanted to come back in terms of that timescale, but certainly we want to improve on that.
Thanks. Yeah. Perhaps Maria might suggest that it may be something we come to the Residents Consortium with, because it'll be a useful topic to discuss with residents, and we can talk about the improvement plans we've got in place and show you the measures. So just a thought, if we don't have the stats today to share with you, we can do that through the Residents Consortium.
That's great, James. Thank you. Maria, when we came back in 2018, I think one of the first things I said to the council, the council staff, was too many homes are too empty for too long. It's now empty for less long, which is pleasing. Obviously we need to try and constantly improve on that, and the pandemic has not helped at all.
I mean, my initial thinking behind my question was that I had to literally wait over 4 months to move into an empty flat.
Maria, I've got some figures in front of it. Is something that we're working on. We've got a sort of a real focused project team at the moment, looking at all the ways that we can reduce that amount of time that it takes to relet a property. Currently, I would say, I mean, it does vary, and we talk about average figures, and within that average, you'll have voids that have major works, and that obviously then brings your average, or puts your average number up. But at the moment, it's looking at around about 48 to 50 days on average. Okay.
Is that okay, Maria? I think we might need explanations around medians, means, and other sort of lovely statistical information to try and explain that and be realistic with you. But I can tell you that is significantly less than what we inherited in 2018, which is great news. Do you have any other comments at all? Sue, if you have, that will be beautiful, but your problems will be dealt with later. They'll be told off. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondered on 5.14, in reference to the passive house standard for new build homes, I just wondered which buildings were going to be piloted with that first.
The passive house standard is in relation to new build housing development. So we've got a number of projects in development at the moment. We've got Stroudon Court, which is in Lee Park. We've got 3 sites we're looking at in Weacock Farm. And basically all of the current pilot work we're doing, a lot of feasibility studies around, we are trying to achieve the passive house standard. So at the moment, all developments we're undertaking, we're trying to achieve passive house standard, but there are some sort of technical issues, financial issues that may stop us achieving that, but we will develop them to the highest environmental standard that we can do.
Do you have any other questions, Charlotte? Sorry, that sounds overly intimidating, and I apologise, I don't have any. But do you have any? If you have, that's great.
Just thinking, Chair, it might be interesting in the future, maybe if not on a formal meeting, but a briefing meeting, just to hear a bit more information, because obviously it's really sort of revolutionary housing, and it's amazing that we're moving into that territory, so I'd be keen.
I realise this is probably your first or second one of these meetings. We actually have approved this before, when your predecessor was in the post. You're perfectly entitled to have whatever briefings you like with officers. I'm the only one who's not allowed to know under the Council's constitution what they are, what the outcome is. But feel free to do that, because there is quite an interesting story, which I will come back to in part in my summing up, if that's all right. Did you have anything else? Okay, that's lovely. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mairead, Steve, and Sally for that. This is a companion piece to what was the capital strategy earlier, because one of the biggest long-term problems we face as a council in the council's housing department is what's called depreciation, which Mr. Denford and the financial colleagues have explained to me is not good, and it's going to get worse, and significantly worse, because it will stop us paying for the projects people want to pay, because we'll just be paying for old buildings. What often happens in the public sector is everybody waits to the last minute before doing anything, and that panic doesn't work. So I'm delighted this report is here, because it shows they're actually thinking ahead and thinking forwards, rather than waiting for the panic to turn up of places that are too old. And that's very, very, very helpful. Just a few points, if I may. The first bit is obviously the things we've got to look at now are decarbonisation, and also making sure people live in decent homes. The other bits that are also coming down the track will be anything that emerges from the Grenfell inquiry. We know that's already stopped with new buildings. Everybody basically has to have a second staircase, which is proving challenging in some cases. But we need to make sure that those two things are coming down the track. We don't know what they are. We don't know what the impact is, but those two things have to be brought in. I think the interesting thing with passive house, and environmentalists I speak to are always completely stunned by this. Essentially, Britain's biggest passive house project is turn right at Somers Town Hub, and that's Wilmcote House. And that's something that we as an authority can be rightly proud of. I think we also have to learn, as I've said to colleagues before, we also have to learn the lessons, because it took too long, but we have to learn the lessons from that. But I think is something, Britain's biggest passive house project is in Somers Town, and that is something of which we can be justifiably proud. It won't work everywhere. So in the meeting we had earlier on, I approved these projects. I knew it won't work everywhere. But we have to try and make sure our homes are as green as possible. If that's passive house, that's lovely. But passive house is a design standard, not an outcome. And we need to make sure our homes are as green as possible for tenants. We can't have a rerun of Copper Green in my ward, which was Code 6 for sustainable homes, which was as green as possible, and nobody ever got told how to use it. So we need to avoid that. We need to make sure that's as practical as possible. I think the other key thing for me, which is based on the learning we've done from the former Leamington Horatia houses, is to make sure that local communities feel part of their future. Too often, social housing projects have been done by architects who've got no idea what to live on, who've got no idea about living on the blocks, don't really want to, and so create places whereby some of the poorest people in our society don't live and are unhappy places. So in our regeneration projects, we have to make sure that people feel part of the future. The fantastic responses we've had from people in Somers Town around the former Horatia and Leamington House projects should give us some comfort that local people are actually more grown up than politicians when it comes to their own areas. But I'm delighted that we're doing this as part of the long-term strategy to get the finances on a sustainable footing so that we can actually do more to improve people's lives. That's why I wanted it brought here. I'm delighted it's come here. And my understanding is that I have to note the information. So I note the information. And thank you for that, Mairead. We come finally to item number 6, which is the private rental sector mediation pilot for Portsmouth. Claire.
Thank you. So the purpose of the report is to present a summary of the performance of the mediation service pilot. The report provides several measures of performance of the service, including the number of referrals and the outcomes from cases for the pilot mediation scheme to date. The report also sets out the cost of the scheme to date. So the pilot scheme began in July 2021 as an identified action from the private rental sector strategy for Portsmouth for 2021 to 2026. It specifically included the action to create a mediation service between landlords and tenants to help improve security of tenure. This service has been provided by the Portsmouth Mediation Service, who were already an established provider in the city. And on the 22nd of March 2022, the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness agreed to the extension of the pilot scheme until the 31st of March this year. So the aim of the scheme was to measure the effectiveness and impact of a landlord and tenant self-referral mediation scheme and to prevent homelessness and rough sleeping by reducing the number of evictions from the private rental sector. This was originally funded through a rough sleeping initiative fund provided by central government, and the extension that was to the scheme that was approved last year has been funded through a homelessness prevention grant, which is another one-off grant provided by central government. This extension was agreed on the basis of allowing officers to obtain more data on the impacts of the scheme. So this report is providing the outcomes of that. So since the pilot scheme was extended at the end of March last year, the mediation service has received 40 referrals. So the rate of referrals into the service has been an average of just below 1 per week. The reason for referrals varies significantly from case to case, but generally centre around a breakdown in communication between parties, usually between a landlord and tenant, but we see examples of other parties being involved in that. The largest referral source has been from council officers. And at the point of referral, the majority of cases, 62%, did not present as likely to result in an eviction at the point of referral. A number of these referrals were seeking assistance between neighbours regarding noise or disputes over guttering, which were not putting tenancies at risk. There were a few cases of tenants making contact about disrepair to the property, which then required the input of the council's private sector housing team. There were also a significant proportion of cases where tenants made contact with the service, having already been evicted, to seek help with reclaiming deposits, where assistance could have been sought through Advice Portsmouth or from one of the government-approved deposit protection schemes. In one case, a landlord requested assistance to evict their tenant, misunderstanding the purpose of the service, and they were unwilling to consider continuing with the tenancy. Of the cases where eviction was likely at the point of referral, which was 38% of referrals, there were only 3 cases where the eviction appears to have actually been prevented, 2 of which were as a direct result of the input of the mediation service. So although feedback from service users was relatively low at around 10%, there were common themes from this feedback. So service users expressed appreciation for the support received and spoke positively about the Portsmouth Mediation Service team, albeit that the outcomes of their cases were not necessarily what they had hoped for. The service was provided to support the residents through situations which would have been emotionally difficult or stressful. The cost of the pilot scheme to date equates to £195 per case. So for the 40 referrals that had been received at the point of writing this report, it would have come to a total cost of £7,800. To fund the continuation of the service, a source of funding for this would be required, and no such funding source has been identified. So the funding currently available for the scheme is due to end at the 31st of March this year. Portsmouth City Council's Housing Needs Advice and Support Service are progressing with plans with local voluntary sector partners to collaborate and provide a prevention hub. The rationale for this is to be able to intervene at the earliest point possible to prevent escalation to eviction. This will enhance the work that already takes place by taking a more cohesive and coordinated approach. The team will continue to work with tenants and landlords with the aim of sustaining existing tenancies wherever possible to prevent evictions and subsequent homelessness. The impact of withdrawing this mediation service is expected to be minimal. On reviewing the referrals received into the service since the end of March last year, the majority did not pose a risk of eviction, and of those that did, very few resulted in the tenancy continuing. The referrals could have been dealt with through a number of alternative services, which are listed in the report, but include Advice Portsmouth, shelter and citizens advice, as well as internal teams within the council, so the private sector housing team and housing needs advice and support team. And for landlords, support through the National Landlords Association or the local support group known as the PDPLA. The government have also indicated plans to introduce a private renters ombudsman as part of the upcoming Renters Reform Bill. Therefore, the recommendations of the report are that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness notes the information in the report regarding the demand for the service and the outcomes of the cases that have gone through the system, that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness agrees to the end of the pilot scheme on the 31st of March this year, and that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness reviews the situation if there is a need for this service in the future and demand supports it.
Okay, thank you for that, Claire. Residents Consortium colleagues, do you have any comments at all?
Just a couple, Claire. I'm looking at 5.5. I am surprised at the low number of people. Only 3 cases where the eviction appears to have been prevented. I don't know why, but I imagine that there would have been a lot more people looking for this help. So that did surprise me. But when we come to, I know that the pilot scheme has finished, but if it was to be reintroduced at some later date, I did bring it up at the initial meeting where I said part of the cost surely could have come from the Landlords Association, because it shouldn't have been down just to the council, because it's a benefit to landlords as well as to the tenants.
Claire, if you want to reply to that, I will reply a little later, but if you want to reply to that, that'll be lovely.
Thank you. Yes, so obviously a lot of work has been done to promote the scheme and to try and get as much engagement as possible from those that would benefit from the service. What we found, unfortunately, as is reflected in the report, that the demand was lower than we were expecting for it, and that is a shame. And that the outcomes achieved were perhaps not as we had hoped as well. In terms of the funding for the scheme, as I've outlined, we had explored initially using one-off grants that we've received from central government to help to trial the scheme and understand the demand and the outcomes that could be achieved through it. And our hope was that if we could see a positive impact, we would be exploring lots of different options for sustaining that going forward. Unfortunately, the outcome of that is that we don't have the evidence to suggest that this is a viable scheme, that those sorts of things would come to fruition, I suppose.
Any other questions, Maria? Okay, thank you, Charlotte.
My question was also going to be about the low take-up, and that it is a shame that there weren't more people that came forward for it. But without being too political, but I will be political, I think there are some things obviously the government should have been bringing forward for quite some time, such as getting rid of no-fault evictions. And I think if that happened, then there'd probably be less of a need for a service like this in the first place, because there'll be better protection for renters, which was promised to them a long time ago, and the government's dragging its heels on. So sorry for the political tick, but it's very frustrating, and I think that would make matters a lot easier for renters in Portsmouth.
People can be as political as they like. I don't mind. They may be wrong, but in this case you're right. I think that's absolutely correct. And I think that one of the problems we've had to do. So the government actually did introduce a court-based ombudsperson system, so a court-based mediation system, which actually had fewer cases across England in a year than we had here in Portsmouth. So they had about 9, if memory serves me right, and we had about 27, which meant ours was about 3 times cheaper, which shows you it can work. But I think it also shows the low take-up of those sorts of things. And you're right, it's absolute. The government shouldn't be dragging its heels, because I think I was about 7 when they first talked about ending no fault evictions. But no, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. And it is a pertinent point about the context within which we work. And that's why this is a matter of real sadness to me, I have to say. The biggest single cause of homelessness in this city is people leaving the private rented sector. Partly it's because they can't afford their rent. Partly it's because the landlord says they want to move back, or they want to sell the property. I've had both whilst renting privately. And so preventing homelessness is absolutely crucial. The work the rough sleeping team has done in this city to lobby government to make prevention of rough sleeping a key priority is astonishingly good, and government finally listened, which is great news. I'm particularly pleased about the prevention hub, because I think that's something that we have to work on, and I'm respectfully suggesting that's worked on significantly going forwards. Like Maria, I've been surprised at the low numbers for months, because I thought that would be useful. The housing ombudsman is in place, but again, as Charlotte has said, government is just dragging its heels about actually doing it properly. The amount of money we spend on each case has gone up. It was 196 quid from when I last looked, and that is also a reason why, when we've got a homelessness prevention grant that should be spent on getting people out of bed and breakfast and out in hotels and into decent accommodation, and should be spent on looking after people's lives, spending on something that isn't working is a matter of sadness, but is absolutely important. Just to say, this is not funded out of people's rents, this is funded out of the general fund, and all councils, I think for the first time in recorded history, voted for a council budget in February. Of course, we can always look at things going forwards, and I want to see if we can learn lessons from here, because I don't want the principles of this scheme to be lost. But it is, as I said, with great sadness that I think we have no choice financially but to approve, sadly, the ending of this pilot scheme. But Claire, if there is any puffs of smoke, chinks of light, and other cliches that we could use to try and see if we can improve this, that would be hugely, hugely helpful, because we don't want to not care about these sorts of things. Is that all right, Claire? All right, so those are the 3 recommendations put forward. And that sort of closes the meeting, but it doesn't. Because before we finish, I just wanted to take a moment, firstly, to thank and recognise the work of someone who today has presented one of his last reports, perhaps probably much to his relief. Meredith Hughes will be leaving his role at the end of July, after 37 years of what his boss describes as commendable service to the City Council and the Housing and Property Service, in all the incarnations, changes, structures, and whatever it is that's occurred over the years. Meredith's tireless dedication, commitment, and professionalism has earned the respect of pretty much everybody, and those people who haven't have been told off, and including partners that we work with. And we owe a debt of gratitude for the management and leadership of our repairs and maintenance service over the years, or should I say decades, if that doesn't make you feel old. There will be a time and place apparently for a longer leaving speech, sorry, but I did want to draw attention to Meredith's leadership throughout the pandemic, because the last few years have been some of the toughest and challenging for everybody, particularly when you have people who don't want people to come in and make their homes safe. or do repairs. That's incredibly difficult for everybody because the consequences can be incredibly difficult. So continuing to deliver something approaching normal during one of the most abnormal situations you can imagine is an amazing achievement. Many housing associations, as we know, just gave up. We didn't do that. That was the right thing to do. And it leaves us in a very different place to people who did give up and now face huge backlog, as Charles and I probably know from our casework, face huge backlogs of repairs at a time when repair costs, as you've outlined earlier on today, Mairead, have gone up. Now, apparently we all might be here after the election, although that's not up to me. That's up, well, for me and Charlotte, that's up to other people to decide, even though we're not up for election. But that's up to more important people to worry about. But several people might be here after the election. And we may well see Mairead back again after the election. I'm sure he's looking forward to it already before he retires. But as this is the last time he'll be setting up probably the most important thing the team does, which is the capital investment plans, it seemed appropriate to mark the occasion with a personal note of thanks, not just from me, but from all members who've been involved in this over the 37 years that you've been doing this. So, Mairead, thank you very much. You don't get a gold watch, you'll be pleased to know, or a gold carriage clock, or whatever it is today. But we are incredibly grateful. So thank you very, very much. I think, gentlemen and friends, gentlemen, ladies, and everyone in between, a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. I'll miss the Welsh rugby shirts in our updates, but such is life.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you very much.
That's all right. Just one other small thing before I close the meeting. This is the last meeting like this of the municipal year. It's the penultimate meeting of the penultimate decision making. The last one luckily goes to my friend Lynn Stagg, whose last council meeting it will be after 16 years of service to the people of Baffins and the people of the city. So I just want to say thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in this, staff, member colleagues, people past and present, for negotiating us through this minefield. Just one final thing. Coming over today, I saw an animation on the screen outside, and it just had two words that I thought were pertinent going forwards, which is be kind. Thank you very much. Oh, and that means the meeting closes at 11:20.